Why does the author of the book of Mark harp so much on 70 AD? You can find it throughout Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but Mark, the beginning trends are established by the author writing the book of Mark. Why does Mark dwell so much on 70 AD? You can find 70 AD in many scenes, in multiple scenes, all throughout their narrative. But the very first chapter, the author of Mark highlights 70 AD in numerous ways. Why? Why is 70 AD so important to the author writing the book of Mark and to their community? Well, I submit to you that it is important because it is at this time that there is something that is justified and that there is something that is verified. A movement, the movement that the Mark community wants to push out, is at this time verified and is at this time justified. Why? Because the retribution witnessed from 70 AD was a fitting example, was a justifier, was a signifier of the quote-unquote divine justice deserved to the Jews' religion and to the Jews' deity. It was revenge. Their revenge was justified. Why? How? Whose revenge? Well, the deity of the Jews killed the Messiah. The deity of the Jews killed the Messiah. He killed the Anointed. That's something that you cannot do and that should not be done, because if done, there are repercussions, there are consequences. And 70 AD, we will get into this, 70 AD demonstrated the consequences, and not only so, it changed the entire landscape for how the Jews' deity was to be observed, giving birth to a denomination. If you're not sure what I mean by that, by the end of this, you will. Opening up to the Bible. Acts 12, 21 to 23. Acts 12, 21 to 23. And upon a set day, Herod, arrayed in royal apparel, sat upon his throne and made an oration unto them. And the people gave a shout, saying, It is the voice of a God and not of a man. And immediately the angel of the Lord smote him, because he gave not God the glory, and he was eaten of worms, and gave up the ghost. If you're looking at this, it was God who killed, who all acknowledge and who is to be acknowledged as Herod Agrippa I. It was God who killed Herod Agrippa I. And when he was alive, when Herod Agrippa I was alive, more than, as Josephus would let us know after he died, while he was alive, history allows us to understand that this Herod Agrippa I was viewed as the Messiah. He was viewed as the anointed of their deity. This king of the Jews. There was no other king of the Jews other than his grandfather, Herod the Great. It was viewed in history that King Agrippa I was the Messiah, and the one thing that you do not do is you do not touch. Doesn't matter who you are, and we will see, doesn't matter who you are. You do not touch the anointed. Does the Bible actually admit this? 1 Samuel 26, 7-9. So David and Abishai came to the people by night, and behold, Saul lay sleeping within the trench, and his spear stuck in the ground in his bolster. But Abner and the people lay round about him. Then said Abishai to David, God hath delivered thine enemy into thine hand this day. Now therefore let me smite him, I pray thee, with the spear, even to the earth at once, and I will not smite him the second time. David said to Abishai, destroy him not. Why? For who can stretch forth his hand against the anointed, against the Lord's anointed, and be guiltless? No one can touch the Anointed. And seeing that the Jews' deity touched the Anointed, and the Jews and the religion of the Jews' deity was wiped out of existence. This is the good news for why Mark's record begins the way that it does. It's the good tidings. It is the glad tidings. It is the gospel. It is the gospel of the deity that reigned supreme over the Jews' deity and brought salvation. It is known and it is understood. It is known and it is understood that the anointed do not touch the anointed. Don't touch the anointed. Psalm 105. Psalm 105, 9-15. Which covenant he made with Abraham and his oath unto Isaac, and confirmed the same unto Jacob for a law, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant, saying, unto thee will I give the land of Canaan, the lot of your inheritance. When they were but a few men in number, yea, very few and strangers in it. When they went from one nation to another, from one kingdom to another people, he suffered no man to do them wrong. Yea, he reproved kings for their sakes, saying, touch not mine anointed, do my prophets no harm. There are two anointeds, and we have to be able to grow familiar with this from Genesis to Malachi. The anointed king, the anointed minister, the anointed messenger, the anointed prophet. Either one, don't touch. Don't touch them. There will be consequences. Let's see some of those consequences play out. 2 Kings 18-23. The king of Assyria is here speaking against Judah. The king of Judah, the anointed. The messenger of the king stood and cried in the Jews' voice, saying, hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus saith the king, let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you out of his hand. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, the Lord will surely deliver us, and this city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria, make an agreement with me by a present. Come to me, come out to me, and then eat ye every man of his own vine, every one of his fig tree. Drink ye every one the waters of his cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of corn and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive oil and of honey, that you may live and not die. And Hezekiah, and hearken not to Hezekiah, when he persuadeth you, saying, the Lord will deliver us. Hath any of the gods of the nations delivered at all his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? King of Assyria is speaking against the anointed. What's the result? 2 Kings 19, 34 and 35. For I will defend this city to save it for mine own sake, and for my servant David's sake. Came to pass that night that the angel of the Lord went out, smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. King of Assyria spoke against, harmed the anointed. What happened? Death. The king of Syria wants to go out against the anointed of Israel. Let's read that. 2 Kings 6, 8-12. Then the king of Syria warred against Israel, took counsel with his servants, saying, in such and such a place shall be my camp. And the man of God sent unto the king of Israel, saying, beware that thou pass not such a place, for there the Syrians are come down. The king of Israel sent to the place which the man of God told him, warned him of, saved himself there not once nor twice. Therefore the heart of the king of Syria was sore troubled for this thing, called his servants, and said, will you not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? And one of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elijah, the prophet that is in Israel, telleth the king of Israel the words that thou speakest in thy bedchamber. The king of Syria is wanting to attack Israel, but he can't. Somehow messages are getting out for where the king of Syria is. King of Syria gathers his men. Listen, one of you is a traitor. Who is giving out the information? Who is for the king of Israel amongst us? None. What's the result? 2 Kings 6, 15-19. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Elisha prayed, said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes, that he may see. The Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed unto the Lord, and said, Smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness, according to the word of Elisha. And Elisha said unto them, This is not the way, neither is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. But he led them to Samaria. The king of Syria wanted to war against the anointed of Israel. The result? They were misled and could never find them. There's no harm should come upon that anointed due to the intercession of Elisha. 2 Chronicles 26:16-18. But when he was strong, the king of Jerusalem wants to now officiate as both king and priest. When he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction, for he transgressed against the Lord his God, and went into the temple of the Lord to burn incense upon the altar of incense. And Azariah the priest went in after him, and with him 80 priests of the Lord that were valiant men. And they withstood Uzziah the king, and said unto him, It appertaineth not unto thee, Uzziah, to burn incense unto the Lord, but to the priests, the sons of Aaron, that are consecrated to burn incense. Go out of the sanctuary, for thou hast trespassed, neither shall it be for thine honor from the Lord God. King of Jerusalem wanted to trespass against the anointed. The priesthood, the anointed priesthood, them that are separated and anointed. What's the result? 2 Chronicles 26:19-21. Then Uzziah was wroth and had a censer in his hand to burn incense, and while he was wroth with the priests, the leprosy even rose up in his forehead before the priests in the house of the Lord from beside the incense altar. And Azariah the chief priest and all the priests looked upon him, and behold, he was leprous in his forehead. And they thrust him out thence, yea, himself hasted also to go out, because the Lord had smitten him. And Uzziah the king was a leper unto the day of his death, dwelt in a several house, being a leper, for he was cut off from the house of the Lord. Rule number 1, do not touch the anointed. Do not harm the anointed. Leave the anointed alone. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter who you are. You touch the anointed, you will get touched back.
Let the Bible be your sanctuary of peace, reflection, and wisdom. Let each verse light your path, like a lantern guiding travelers through night's darkest hours. Embrace words of wisdom as leaves to a tree, each one vital for your growth and nourishment. In moments of uncertainty, let its counsel be the anchor, steadying your ship amidst life's stormy seas. Seek counsel not just in joy, but in trials, for in its guidance you'll find a friend. Let every parable, every psalm, resonate within you, creating a heart and soul that is newly attuned to think and feel. Thus, journey with the Bible as your guide and counselor, and let its wisdom light your path to an enduring peace.
70 AD signified something very important to the followers of King Herod Agrippa I. King Herod Agrippa I was the Messiah. He was the Messiah. He was the anointed King of the Jews and Messiah. He fulfills a lot of the Messiah bills, the Messiah qualities, the Messiah character traits. He fulfills it all, whether in character or in history. He fulfills it. 70 AD, with the destruction of Jerusalem, because God killed the Messiah, God touched the anointed. Therefore, God must now be destroyed. God was destroyed. This destruction of God which the authors of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and the narrative therein, they signify by the ripping of the inner temple's linen, symbolizing the destruction of God and the Jews' religion at that time of the crucifixion. This changed the landscape completely of how the Jews' religion and how the Jews' God should be seen. It was due to jealousy that something Agrippa said. Agrippa I said something during his oration that made the deity of the Jews jealous. The one that anointed him, or I should say, the one that supposedly anointed him, became jealous at him, and so much so that he killed him. The one thing that you don't do, you don't touch the anointed. 70 AD verified this fact to a certain audience. To this same certain audience, it verified the fact that King Herod Agrippa I was the Messiah. It then verified the fact to that same audience. That because God killed Agrippa in Agrippa I, and then God himself was in turn killed by Rome, the deity of Rome, who is Jupiter the conqueror, this allowed the audience of Herod Agrippa I to understand that the God of the Jews is actually a lesser deity. He's actually a lesser deity. He is not the all-powerful. If he was, that would have never happened. And in a way where their religion was wiped out. This allowed a change to the perception of the Jews' deity to take place. And this, again, with that change, it allowed the audience that followed Agrippa I in this way to see that the Jews themselves and the God of the Jews, that the Jews were the actual heathen, because only the heathen got treated the way that Rome treated them. Looking in the book of Deuteronomy 7:5. But thus shall ye deal with them. You shall destroy their altars, break down their images, cut down their groves, burn their graven images with fire. This is what happened to them. Deuteronomy 12:2-3. You shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which you shall possess serve their gods, upon the high mountains and upon the hills and under every green tree. You shall overthrow their altars, break their pillars, burn their groves with fire. You shall hew down the graven images of their gods and destroy the names of them out of that place. The name of the God of the Jews was taken away from Jerusalem. Rome did that. When you're looking at this event through the lens of the followers of the King Herod Agrippa I, a lot changes. A new dispensation, you can say, is on the rise. All of a sudden, the Jews are seen as heathen. All of a sudden, the God of the Jews is seen as a lesser deity. To the kings, 2 Kings 10:25-28. It came to pass, as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offerings, that Jehu said to the guard and to the captains, Go in and slay them, let none come forth. They smote them with the edge of the sword, and the guard and the captains cast them out, went to the city of the house of Baal. They are killing. Jehu is killing, setting up a thing where he's killing the prophets of Baal. 26. And they brought forth the images of the house of Baal and burned them. They break down the images of Baal and break down the house of Baal and made it a draught house unto this day. Thus Jehu destroyed Baal out of Israel. We cannot forget that the author of Acts paints Herod Agrippa I doing this same work. The work of the Messiah, dealing only with the opinion from Genesis to Malachi. The work of the Messiah, part of their work, is to get Baal out of the land. Herod Agrippa I is portrayed as getting Baal out of the land, killing the prophets of Baal. Baal meaning the dying and rising deity. Herod Agrippa persecuted the church of the dying and rising deity and killed their prophets, just as Jehu. This is a signifier of the work of the Messiah. We can't forget that. What happened to the Jews? This is what happened to the quote-unquote heathen. And now it's happening by Rome to the Jews. And now the perception is the Jews' deity, that's really not the deity. This is a lesser deity. The Jews, they are actually heathen. They've been calling people heathen all this time. Now look at them getting treated like heathen. They are no different. All of a sudden, the shift changes now. There's a change in the philosophical and theological atmosphere of the Jews' religion. That's important. And that's why 70 AD is highlighted as the glad tidings, the age, the dawn of the gospel, because it is at this time that a lot is verified. The movement of the marked community is verified. And the verification of that movement transcends the borders of the religion that they're familiar with and takes on a new spiritual, esoteric level.
Understand the deeper meaning behind the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. Discover an allegory that speaks to personal and intellectual devotional growth. Meet the Dawn of Devotion, a sacrifice for devotional evolution. This book challenges traditional interpretations of Jesus' resurrection and crucifixion. Explore the allegorical journey reflecting personal and intellectual growth. Experience a narrative that transforms your understanding of devotion. Get your copy of The Dawn of Devotion, a sacrifice for devotional evolution today, and begin your resurrection.
Now, as you're hearing me say that 70 AD is celebrated because it verified a lot to the followers of King Herod Agrippa I, the followers of the marked community, it verified their movement and it justified their movement. When you're hearing me say that it showed the deity of the Jews to be a lesser deity, what does that sound like? When you're hearing me say that it showed that the Jews were now to be accounted for heathen because they're getting treated as such, their religion, what does that sound like? Let's do some reading. In discussing Gnosticism, it should also be mentioned that modern scholarship has occasionally contested the existence of a sect that could rightly be categorized as Gnostic at all. Some have suggested that it existed only as a part of a spectrum of beliefs emerging in the early Christian era and may have little descriptive power. Attempting to rewrite the narrative about Gnosticism, scholars such as Brake have asserted early Christian leadership merely liked to imagine itself unified and minimized diversity. As a consequence, heterodox groups were simply labeled Gnostic by those attempting to refine and unify diverse groups of early Christians. Likewise, he argued that since Gnostics did not themselves unite under a banner of Gnosticism, but only followed what he described as a school of thought, they could not be said to exist as a proper sect. Therefore, according to Brake, the category commonly known as Gnosticism was merely a product of the suppression of and competition between the many alternative interpretations of Jesus of Nazareth's significance in the early Christian era. In contrast with this view, French philosopher Simon Pétrement observed that although groups such as Simonians, Menandrians, Saturnalians, Valentians, Ophites, Sethians, and others all came to be categorized as Gnostics. Valentinians. Justification existed for this umbrella term in that they shared demonstrable common features. Likewise, Brake did allow that similarities existed between those groups which amounted to what he described as a skeleton or framework for what would later be designated as Gnostic by church fathers, and that supernatural figures, especially the nature of the first ruler, the demiurge, were a part of this core framework. Therefore, even under the scrutiny of critical scholarship, Gnostic narrative did have degrees of unity as it pertains to the present analysis of the primordial serpent, the demiurge, and related figures as a mythological typology. Within Gnosticism, the most preeminent among these supernatural figures, also referred to as divine principles, was its highly complex version of the demiurge. There are several notable characteristics of the demiurge according to the Gnostics, which shed light on how they interpreted Platonic, pagan, and Jewish ideas. Each of these demonstrated how Gnostics attempted to reconcile these seemingly conflicting ideas that converged and mingled in the first centuries of the Christian era. First, reflecting upon Timaeus, Gnostics saw room to parse out a unique version of the demiurge that differed from previous ones. Turner explained how a Platonically informed Jewish interpretation of creation, exemplified in Philo, contrasted with the way the Gnostics synthesized their demiurge from Plato. Thus, in Middle Platonic fashion, Philo of Alexandria identified the biblical creator God with a supreme monad who generates and presides over the Logos, the paradigmic model of the Timaeus conceived as an intelligible world of ideas identified as God's thoughts, whose powers create and govern the sensible world. But the Gnostic reading of Scripture revised this ranking by identifying the supreme God of Genesis with Plato's demiurge, whose supremacy on a literal reading of the Timaeus appeared to be compromised by having to consult a divine paradigm above him as the model for his creation. This suggests that there must be a God presiding over the ideal realm who is superior to the God of Genesis. This interpretation amounted to a toehold in which the creator of Genesis could be construed as inferior and therefore flawed or incomplete. This in turn suggested to the Gnostic that much of the Orthodox Jewish and Christian tradition about creation could be re-examined. To this end, the Gnostic text described the demiurge as an archon who was created first and responsible for the flawed material world, a broken counterfeit creation in comparison to the heavenly ideal. Therefore, although the demiurge within Gnosticism was the creator of the world, he was also closely associated with the elements of chaos and the outer darkness. The craftsman god contrasted with previous versions in that it was overtly malicious. Forsyth characterized the difference between these versions of the demiurge, stating, "This term demiurge derives ultimately from Plato, meaning world maker, but what it meant among these late Hellenistic spiritual movements was the idea of a creator god who had bungled his job and who was therefore unworthy of worship." To the Gnostic, this also explained the seemingly jealous, insecure deity of the Old Testament, who was regarded as distasteful to some Greek minds. Now, I had to read all of that because this is what the 70 AD event, destruction of Jerusalem, gave birth to. It gave birth to a new movement of how to observe the Jews' God and how to observe God in general. All of this took place due to the audience at that time observing something significant within the death of the Messiah, who was Herod Agrippa I. It was the death of the Messiah that, to this audience, triggered the revenge of a deity far greater than the deity of the Jews. This deity killed the deity of the Jews, which set off a trend for understanding the greater deity and for signifying the relevance of the lesser deity that the Jews' God was. 70 AD is important to the author of the book of Mark because it signified the praise, the good news of their movement. The good news of their movement, the verification of the Jews as heathen, of the Jews' deity as no deity at all, and of the certification of their movement, the community of Mark, or Marcus Julius Agrippa I, for whom this book is written of and characterized. It verified their movement and their placement of this individual king. It allowed them to transition him to where they believed they knew he should be. This was the good news, the destruction of Jerusalem, because it verified the movement of this community. That's why the author of Mark harps on it so much, and that's why there are so many traces of it, and everything leads back to it throughout their narrative.